tonight. I hope you had some fun at that. Today, we're lucky to have
my name is Jane Dong.
he's got a whole long set of awards, and if I read them all, it would take a whole session, so I'm not going to do that. He's done breakthrough work in a number of areas, like co-inventing CAPTCHAs that you may have heard about. One of his latest blockbuster successes is Duolingo. I know that a lot of you guys are using it, including me and Bob have it on our phones. And I've heard very good things about the people who have been using it, and it's had runaway success. And so Luis Von Ahn is going to tell us a little bit about that and answer any questions you may have. So please join me in welcoming Luis Von Ahn.
All right, so it's a relatively small room, so you should interrupt me if you have any questions anywhere along the way. That would be better because I only have like 10 slides. So please interrupt. Okay, I'm only going to talk about Duolingo. I'm not going to talk about my previous lives. I'm also a professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University, but I am on leave. I have been on leave for 3.5 years. Yeah, 5 is the maximum there, and you have to negotiate a lot. So
Tell us why.
Why have I been on leave?
Why this opportunity took you away from Carnegie?
Yes, so I will tell you what happened. So basically, what happened is I was in a pretty interesting position in my life. I had just sold my second company to Google. It was that company was these distorted characters that you have seen all over the internet, CAPTCHAs. And I briefly considered retiring, but then I decided that I wanted to do more stuff. And in particular, what I decided to do is I wanted to work on something that was really related to my true passion, which has always been education. That's why I became a professor to begin with. So I wanted to do something related to education, and that's kind of where Duolingo came about. But my views on education are very related to where I'm from. I'm from Guatemala. This, by the way, is a public service announcement. That is where Guatemala is. That is also not where they keep the prisoners. That's called Guantanamo. Now, Guatemala is a very poor country. And a lot of people talk about education as something that brings equality to different social classes. But I always saw it as the opposite, particularly in Guatemala. I always saw it as something that brings major inequality to different social classes, because what happens in practice is that people who have a lot of money can buy themselves the best education in the world and come to, for example, a university here in the US, and just basically, because they get such great education, they continue having a lot of money. Whereas people who don't have very much money barely learn how to read and write, and because of that, they continue not having very much money. So it's this thing that causes huge inequality. So I wanted to do something that was related to education that would give equal access to education to everyone. That was the premise of it. Now, education is very general, and I did not presume to be able to do something for every aspect of education. So I decided to, started looking at all kinds of different areas of education, things that we could teach. And pretty quickly, I converged on something that is pretty big everywhere in the world, which is learning a foreign language. It's big everywhere in the world except in the US. Not that many people are learning a foreign language here, but in the world, there's 1.2 billion people learning a foreign language. This is a lot of people learning a foreign language. And this is a pretty interesting market. About 800 million of these people satisfy three problems. First, they're learning English. Second, the reason they're learning English is in order to get a job or a better job or sort of get ahead in life. And third, they are of low socioeconomic conditions. Okay, so 2/3 of these people are basically people who are trying to learn English in order to get out of poverty. That's the language learning market in the world.
Does it work?
Does what? Yes, it does. In fact, it depends on the country. Obviously, if you're in a country where the English is the native language, you already know English. But in other countries, it depends.
That's not a sure path.
But it depends on the country. In many countries, just knowledge of English basically doubles your income. So it works. Now it depends on the country again, but yeah, in almost every country, knowledge of English increases your salary significantly.
Actually, it's probably true in the U.S. too.
In the U.S., it's probably more than that. So that's the language learning market. It's basically mostly people trying to learn English in order to get out of poverty. That's mainly it. Now, before we launched Duolingo, we started working on Duolingo about 4 years ago. 4.5 years ago or so. Before launching Duolingo, most of the ways there were to learn a language were very expensive, especially through software. So for example, in the US, there's this thing called Rosetta Stone, which at the time was about $1,000. In Latin America, there's a program called Open English, which is also about $1,000. And every kind of region has their own piece of software that had their own piece of software that was about $1,000 or $500 or something like that. So the irony of it all was most of the people trying to learn a language were trying to do so in order to get out of poverty, but it seemed like you needed about $1,000 to get out of poverty, which kind of made no sense.
You said at the time they had to respond.
Oh yeah, most of them have. I mean, Rosetta Stone is essentially bankrupt at this point in time. They're close to it, and they did it. No, there was no guarantee that it would work, and I will tell you the main reason why it did not work is because people didn't stick to it. That's the biggest reason why people don't.
You have to make a sizable investment.
Sure, sure. I mean, making a sizable investment probably made them more committed, but still, I mean, people drop out. That's probably the biggest thing. So what we decided to do was to make a completely free way to teach language. That was the idea with Duolingo. So the idea to begin with was we're gonna release something that teaches a language and that is 100% free. We're never gonna charge. That was the guiding factor, and we launched it. We launched about 4 years ago, and since then it's grown a lot. So we launched about 4 years ago. We launched a thing called Duolingo, and it's been very successful. We have about a total of about 150 million users. Let's see, all kinds of things have happened there. Apple named it the iPhone app of the year a couple years in a row. Google for Android devices also named it the best app. It's the single most downloaded education app of any type of education everywhere in the world. We have so many people learning languages. There's a few interesting statistics. For example, in the U.S., there are more people learning languages on Duolingo than there are people learning languages in the whole U.S. public school system.
You say there are 150 million users. You mean 150 million people downloaded it or actually using it?
They're actively using is about 50 million. So about a third are actively using that.
As opposed to having it on their
phone. Having it on their phone is about 150 million. And let's see, what else? We teach all kinds of, now we started by teaching only like Spanish and English and, kind of three larger languages. We now teach about 23 different languages. And some of them are smaller. So for example, we teach Irish, which honestly, I actually didn't know Irish was a language. I thought they spoke English there, and they do, but they have their own language too. There's a funny thing about Irish. There's 94,000 native speakers of Irish. We have about 1 million people actively learning Irish on Duolingo. And the number grows by 20% for 1 day of the year, which is St. Patrick's Day. It goes by 20% and it goes down the next day, which is very funny. So we have, and I think the most, to me, the most rewarding part of it, in the last 4 years, there's a number of countries where the educational systems are now using Duolingo to teach English in their public schools. well, every public school that has access to the internet, which in many of these countries is not many schools. As for example, in Colombia, every public school that has access to the internet, which happens to be about 5% of the public schools, are using Duolingo to teach English. And there's a few of these countries. And so now a lot of these are developing countries. And if you go to a public school in a developing country, that means you really don't have very much money because public school systems in developing countries are usually not very good. So if you have any kind of money, you send your kids to a private school. So we have, on the one hand, we have kids in developing countries in public schools using Duolingo to learn English. On the other hand, Bill Gates uses Duolingo to learn French. So that, to me, is the most rewarding part. The fact that the same system is used by some, low-income kids in developing countries as the richest man in the world is basically what we wanted to do. That more money could not buy you a better education. That's what we wanted to do. Now, we've, I'll tell you a little more about how Duolingo works and everything, but
Can I jump in?
yes, you can.
Are there any other cases where you think that's true or close to true?
Where more money cannot buy you a better education? Yep. Probably. I haven't thought about that. It's generally not true, but I would assume there are other cases. Khan Academy is probably something similar like that, where I think that you see world-class kids using it, and also underprivileged kids using it. So I would assume that's true for Khan Academy.
But you have to have access to the internet, right?
Right. So you cannot get to the bottom box.
So why not develop a Duolingo where it's maybe a large program, but it's simply a program that runs on your computer? You don't need the internet.
Yeah, so we're doing that for Android devices. We have a fully offline version on Android devices. There's a pretty, it's an interesting pickle that you're in, because for one, if you do that, the app size increases quite a bit.
But for a computer, not a phone.
We've done it for Android devices because that's what reaches the most people. So as opposed to a computer, Android devices, if you go, say, to India, that's kind of what everybody has, an Android device, not a computer. The problem is the app size increases quite a bit. It's now a 50 megabyte app size. And downloading 50 megabytes happens to not be trivial. I mean, it is here, but so there's that. The other thing is, one of the reasons why we keep it connected to the internet, or we prefer keeping it connected to the internet, is because a lot of the things we teach react to what you do. So basically, the next thing that we're going to teach you, we use our servers to try to figure out what is, everything you've done so far to try to teach you better, because it's adaptive. And we can't do that anymore if we get it to download. So basically, the teaching is crappier if we do that. But yeah.
The number of people, what's the number of people on the internet in some of these countries now?
It's growing.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the country. Penetration, for most of these places, penetration is getting close to 50%. So,
if I can ask a business-oriented question. So you're in India, could you or should you cut a deal with a Reliance so that a Duolingo gets bundled into the kind of services?
Yeah, we've talked to a lot of these, not just India, I mean, a lot of these carriers, for example. Right. We've talked to a lot of them. It's not super easy. It requires, every time we've talked to them, the one we got farthest to was Carlos Slim's, basically monopoly in Latam.
Sure.
After about 1.5 years of negotiations, we gave up. It was just taking too long, and it was, so that was, I mean, I think a lot of times it's just, we have a small team, so by now it's a larger team, but it's only 80 people that work on this, and I think we just kind of gave up at some point. It's sad that that's the reasons why that doesn't happen. We kind of just give up.
May I ask one last question along those lines? So you look at a service that's a global, I'm thinking global services like a Facebook or a Twitter, and I can imagine a circumstance, particularly with a Twitter, where you have an API and people can bundle in and try it, and it seeks out that sort of way. So you become sort of like a force multiplier.
By having an API.
Yes, for an existing social platform, and that creates compatible incentives for partnering with you. Have those kind of, do you have the APIs, and have you discussed those kinds of partnerships as well?
No, I think that's probably the reason why this was moving so slowly, because we don't charge the users in particular. There was not much money to give back to the carrier. Usually the way the carriers work, if you want to get pre-installed in there, there's many, for example, WhatsApp was pre-installed in many of these places.
Exactly.
Yeah, but essentially WhatsApp was paying for it.
Okay.
And we were not willing to pay for it. We used the argument of this is good for your users and this is good for the world. And that is not as powerful as an argument as here's some money to pay this. No, we're not. We are for profit, but we are still a money-losing institution.
Your venture funders see a time when you will.
Oh yeah. We're close to breaking even by now.
So explain.
So at some point, yeah, I'll tell you how we make money in a bit. So here's some of the things that people say about Duolingo. For example, this person said in the past they learn more from Duolingo than 4 years of high school. That I think says more about high school than about Duolingo. It's not that good. There's this other person. That was my mother. Now, one of the things that we have done to begin with Duolingo is try to make it feel as much as a game as possible. When we started working on it, we realized that the single biggest thing about learning anything by yourself is keeping yourself motivated. And no matter what you're learning, just keeping yourself motivated is really hard.
Did you know that on the way in?
We did, and there's a lot of research that basically says, this is going to invalidate some of the things that I'm going to say, but there's a lot of research that basically says, particularly for learning a language, but for learning many things, what matters the most is how much time you spend doing it. That's really what matters the most. So you can have some methods that are more efficient than others, but really, if you can get somebody to spend 500 hours practicing a language, no matter what the method is, you're going to get them to some sort of fluency. Of course, you can do, I think you can go about twice as fast with different methods than others, but it's not much more than 2x multiplied. I don't think so. I don't think you can 10x it, for example. So what matters the most is just how much time we get you to use the thing. That's really what matters the most. So that's why we spent a lot of time making Duolingo feel like you're playing a game. So this is what the app looks like for if you're using it on an iPhone. This is the home screen. What we did is we split up the content of the whole language into multiple units that we call skills. So for example, food is a skill. So there you can learn everything there is to know about kind of food stuff, like how to order in a restaurant, what the word for pizza is, which usually is pizza. And we have other skills like animals or plurals, where you learn how to pluralize in that language, etc. And the idea is that at the beginning only one unit is unlocked, and when you complete it, you unlock another row of units. So you keep on unlocking this. This unlocking mechanism, by the way, is very rewarding, and it's something that keeps people going down. And in each one of these units, when you're learning, basically, each one of these units has a bunch of lessons, and each lesson consists of a bunch of different exercises. Now, each exercise, the other driving factor with Duolingo when we were designing it is we want people to be active at all times. So there's no point where you're really just reading theory or anything. You're really always doing something. So we teach you through a bunch of different exercises, and the exercises can have multiple modalities. I mean, in some, you get to translate, for example, here it would be somebody learning Spanish. You get to translate that from Spanish into English, or you get to kind of click on an image, and at all times you can get it either right or wrong. There's other exercises where you have to speak to the app and it tells you whether you said it correctly or not. But at all times you can get it either right or wrong.
When you speak to the app, there's not a human listening.
No, it's a speech recognizer, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
You've just set up a conflict here with what you said earlier, which is you have this design with pads and then modules that you complete.
Yeah.
But you said the most important thing is how much time do you spend?
Yeah.
Do you instrument the amount of time people spend on a module? And based on where, because you now have lots of information, based on where they are, do you send a prompt or anything? Because that would be an interesting A/B experiment. Well, if you send us, you could finish this unit in just 15 minutes.
We have done probably on the order of, I don't know, 5,000 A/B experiments based on similar things like that. Yes. We are at any point in time, today we are running about 100 A/B experiments right now.
Okay.
So we do a lot of that. That's basically all we do. Yes.
I've heard you talk before about how evidence-driven your pedagogy is. Could you expand a little bit more on that, and then also talk about in contrast to other pedagogy and what you learned about those previous schools of thought about language?
Yeah, I have that. Can I talk about that in a bit? I have that. Yes.
What about somebody who already knows some Spanish?
Yeah.
You want to start with, what's
So when you start on the app, there's two choices. It says start from the beginning or take a placement test, basically. And then we do about a 5-minute little test that places you we do best effort to place you somewhere in the app that we think is appropriate. Now, by the way, the placement test, this is almost an impossible problem because we don't, I mean, you know, we have some way of teaching. You learn some random way. We don't know how you learn. We got to put you somewhere in our course, basically, but we're not going to get it precisely right.
Is it random? I mean, there's a whole lot of people who have taken 2 years of high school Spanish, and they're all...
It's pretty random. It's not 100% random, but it's pretty random. I mean, there's just a lot of things. So it works. I mean, we can place you pretty well, but, you know, it's not the case that after taking a 5-minute test.
A different way.
Yes.
There's the people, just random people who come and choose the app. There's a big chunk of people who have gone through, who want to learn it, and they've got some other curriculum.
Yeah.
And you probably studied many of these other curricula and get a sense, okay, everybody learns, you know, 5 things in the first year.
Yeah, the problem is there's hundreds of these.
Okay, they're not.
It's not that easy to do that. But yeah, we do a best effort to try to place you when that happens, and it works pretty well. But the idea is that in each one of these exercises, you get it either right or wrong. There's this bar at the top that, you know, whenever it starts out empty, and then whenever you get something correct, it moves to the right. Whenever you get something wrong, it moves to the left. And the idea is you finish a lesson when the bar's full. So you got to get a certain number of things right. And now that bar is actually much more sophisticated than people realize, because we take into account basically the difficulty of the problem, but not just the difficulty of the problem, the difficulty of the problem for you in particular. So we basically have an idea of how likely you are to get this right. And if you break our expectations, we move the bar more than we should. So for example, if we give you a very easy problem and you get it correct, we don't move the bar up very much because we kind of expected you to get it correctly. But if we give you a very hard problem that we know it's hard for you and you get it right, we move it up a lot. But if you get it wrong and it was a very hard problem, we don't move it down very much because anyways, we kind of expected you to get it wrong. So we don't move it down a lot.
How long does it take you to figure out how good I am?
We can figure out pretty quickly. Within 5 to 10 minutes, we can figure out pretty quickly.
5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be perfect, but yeah, we can figure out pretty quickly.
Why do you
yes.
take time? I'm very confused by this. 5 to 10 minutes, but you're doing, how many things do you do in a 10-minute span?
Each exercise takes about 15 to 20 seconds.
Okay.
So you can do...
So 5 to 10 minutes is a lot of
exercise. And again, it's not perfect, but we get a really good idea. And that model keeps getting better over time. The more you use Duolingo, the better that model gets. But within 10 minutes, we have a relatively good idea of how much Spanish you know. And it's not... And if you think about it, as a human, when you come across somebody who speaks, English, within about 30 seconds, you know how well they speak English. Like, it's pretty quick. You're not going to be able to figure out exactly 100% all the vocabulary words they know, but you can tell within a few seconds, yeah, this person really speaks English well versus not. Yes?
Love the product. Really curious what you're seeing on the demographics, especially the expectations. So like older versus younger people. I don't know how personalized versus grouping works here, but just curious what you're...
Yeah, we have, so I'll tell you, they vary a lot per country. So, and one of the biggest, so we have 3 kind of user personas that we develop for. And these are kind of the big chunks of users that we have. One is, and I'll tell you the full persona. Obviously, these are generalizations. Not everybody falls under this. But basically, one is somebody who is in an English-speaking country, let's say the United States. They are trying to learn a language that's not English, usually Spanish. That's kind of the most popular language to learn if you already know English. But they're trying to learn a language. The main reason they're learning a language is not because they actually care about learning a language. It's just because, at least I'm not wasting my time. Like, really, that's what they're thinking. They think this is kind of fun, and I could be playing Candy Crush, or I could be playing Clash of Clans or whatever. But this is kind of fun, and at least I'm not wasting my time. So that's what they think.
They don't even have a trip to Barcelona plan?
No. They're just kind of just at least at the end of this, I learned some of a language. So they know that they are on an iPhone, and they're relatively wealthy. So that's kind of one user persona we have. Another user persona we have is they are in a non-English speaking country. They are learning English. They actually care about learning English, and they really want to do so because they want to, somehow get some sort of job. They are on an Android device. don't have very much money, and their internet connection sucks. That's another user persona. And then the last one, which is growing over time, it wasn't very big a few years ago, but it is now bigger, is a kid in school. Because a significant number of schools are using Duolingo. In the United States, about 5% of all language classrooms use Duolingo. And so that's kind of another persona. So these are three different personas that we have. And they're pretty different from each other. Their motivations are different. They spend different amounts of time. Notice I'll call it the American. They don't actually care how much they learn. Whereas the person learning English really cares about how much they learn. And the school kids, they just want to get their points.
Just for distributional sake, those three persona account for what portion?
Yeah. Probably, so it's probably, up until about 2 years ago, it was probably half and half the first two personas. Now, about 20% are people using it in schools. So that's, these are, of course, very rough numbers and massive generalizations, right? But that's kind of the idea. The average age of the users is about 29 years old. Is more females than males. It's about 60% female. Apparently advertisers care about this. Yes?
So does the accuracy of your scoring and the efficacy of the modules, does that change across languages
Yes.
and user type?
Yes, it changes mainly across languages. Not all our courses are of equal quality. And the quality really, the biggest thing that matters for quality is how many people are using that course, for two reasons. One, this is an adaptive system that's getting better over time. It's actually getting better at teaching, and I'm going to explain a little how it's getting better at teaching. So that matters. So the more people that use it, the better the course gets. Secondly, the more people that use it, the more resources we put into that course, because it makes sense. So for example, if you are learning Spanish from English, by the way, we have different courses. You don't just learn Spanish, you learn Spanish for English speakers. And we teach Spanish differently if you are a Portuguese speaker or if you are a Chinese speaker, etc. So we teach it differently. But if you're an English speaker learning Spanish, that's a pretty good course because we have a lot of users. Whereas, on the other hand, if you are a Spanish speaker, we teach Guarani, which is an indigenous language. We teach it for Spanish. If you're a Spanish speaker learning Guarani, it's probably a pretty crappy course, is my guess. Because my guess is that there's only about, 5,000 people taking that course. So most of the things we have will not have tuned themselves. Yes?
Is the content created by a machine? Or
No, the content is created by volunteers. And this is what happens. So we have we started with only teaching Spanish for English speakers, English for Spanish speakers, and German for English speakers. That's what we started with, and we made that ourselves. Well, there's a question of what the content means. Part of the content is made by humans, and then there's a whole artificial intelligence thing to try to, but there's a seed that's made by humans. We started making that ourselves. But at some point, people were asking for so many different languages. They were asking, like Guarani. I don't know anything about Guarani, and we don't have anybody in the team that knows anything about Guarani. So what we did is we opened up our course creation tools that we had internally to the world. And now if you want to add a new language to Duolingo, you can apply. And we check out whether you're a real person and you actually know the language that you want to teach, etc. And then we let you make the course. And so volunteers are making the course. We've made about 80 courses based on volunteers. And they're pretty good. They're actually, we've found that the quality of the volunteer-made courses usually is better than the quality of the courses we've made ourselves. The handmade part. Yes.
Chinese one for English is Chinese for Mandarin for English speakers.
We don't teach that. We do not teach. The only Asian language that we currently teach is Vietnamese, I think. Yeah. We do not teach Chinese. We do not teach Japanese. We do not teach Korean, although Korean is going to happen soon. There's a huge reason for it. Teaching the alphabet, we don't have a great way of doing that yet. Well, not the alphabet, the characters in this case, it's not an alphabet. We don't have a great way of teaching that yet, so we've paused it. And so that's it.
Do you have no paid content creators on your payroll?
Yeah, we do, for Spanish, German, English, and French. That's it. So we have four languages, and the rest is not. Yeah, yes.
Is there like a threshold for the number of active users where you reach like a good type of course, where you're seeing like when you hit 20,000 users, the course is this much better?
Yeah, it's probably about 100,000 active users. Okay. I don't know this exact number here, and it's not an exact number. This is a gradient. But after about 100,000, I would say it's a pretty good course.
How much would you say you can carry over from like Spanish to Italian, or maybe even to other topics? I don't know if you ever thought about that.
You can carry over quite a bit.
Yeah. So,
yeah, and it matters how you teach it also. So for example, Portuguese and Spanish are two languages that are very similar. The way we teach Spanish to Portuguese speakers is pretty interesting. I mean, we basically assume that they already know like half. We just start with just because first of all, like half the words are cognates that are basically the same in both languages. So we teach it pretty differently.
But also what I meant was that you may have one group that has a small number of users, but you can take all the language learning from a different.
We do some of that, but not as much as we would like to. Yeah, we do some of that.
Even the just go back to Chinese.
Yes.
The most rapidly growing language in schools.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Given the problem that you have with these alphabets, does that mean you don't have Arabic or Hebrew as well?
We teach Arabic and Hebrew. We do teach those. They're alphabets. The key is alphabet is much better than character system. Yeah. So we do teach Hebrew and Arabic, not yet, but we're about to teach. But we do teach Hebrew.
Chinese is one of the most rapidly growing
languages
it is. In public schools in the U.S.
You're saying why? How come you're not teaching?
Yeah.
No, I mean, a lot of people say that, and I say that too.
The market's not big enough.
No, it's big.
It's not. It's actually not yet. It's very rapidly growing, but it is not yet very big. If you look at public schools in the United States, 52% of the people in a public school in the United States that are learning a language are learning Spanish. After that, 26% is French, and after that, about 6% is German, and Chinese is about 3%. But I mean, compared to 5 years ago, Chinese was probably like 1%. I mean, so it's growing very fast, but it's still not as big as it should be, probably. Yes?
How do you think about skills such as writing and conversation? Because that doesn't necessarily correspond to these types of tasks.
Yeah, we do. We spend a lot of time thinking about that. So there's 4 things you need to learn when you're learning a language. I mean, you need to learn how to read, how to write, how to listen, and how to speak. And we measure really well how Duolingo works. Duolingo works really well for writing and reading. Well, reading is the thing that works the most at. Writing is kind of second. Listening is okay, and speaking is kind of pretty shitty, I would say. But we're about to change that, and I will talk about that a little bit. But I would say for speaking it's not very good. Okay, but anyways, the idea is you teach with these little exercises. Now, as I have mentioned, we test everything in this user interface. We've tested it a gazillion times, all kinds of things. So for example, here's just one example of a test we did. The user interface used to look, just look at the top. The top of the user interface used to look like this, now it looks like that. The way it used to work is it used to be the case that each lesson had 20 exercises, and each time you got something wrong, you lost a heart. There were these 3 hearts at the top, and if you lost all 3 hearts, you had to start over. That was the way it worked. Then we moved to this bar that goes up and down. We tested that. We ran an A/B test, so basically to some fraction of the new users, we gave them this new system, and then we figured out whether people used it more, did they learn better, etc. And we found that by moving from the hearts to this, we saw about a 5% increase in retention, so in user retention, so them coming back more often. So about a 5% increase, and we do a lot of tests like that. And sometimes some really small things have a huge impact. So for example, on the web version of Duolingo, it used to say, hover on the words to see their translations. It used to say that. We switched it at some point to hover or click on the words to see their translations. We didn't make any code changes. It's just hover. That is what it is. But we changed to hover or click to see their translation. That had about a 15% increase in people who went on to the next screen. And we found it out, it's because a significant fraction of the world's population does not know what hover means. They just, click. And the funny thing is we do not look for a click in that. It's just a hover, but we just said hover or click. And so this is the type of thing we're always testing. And sometimes really tiny things have huge impact. And sometimes entire redesign. So for example, if you've ever used the app on Android, you see that it does not have these people in it. So these people exist in the iOS app, these little characters there. On Android, they're not there, and it's because when we put those characters, we thought this was going to have a pretty big impact, and it took a lot of effort. It had no impact whatsoever putting those characters.
So I have to ask,
yes.
You must be sick of the literature of behavioral economics, but I would imagine that the Richard Thaler's and the Dan Ariely's probably have given you all manner of advice for nudges, using screens to do nudges.
Yeah.
Has that stuff been really helpful?
It has been very helpful. It has been very helpful. Yeah. I mean, we have a whole team of people who basically spend time thinking about that.
That stuff works.
Yeah, that stuff works. There's an amazing amount of things that you can do to just, when you tell people or what you tell people, that stuff works.
You're a professor still too on leave.
Yes.
Does it go the other direction, that you do these tests and you go back to the literature and say, you guys had these 12 people, undergraduates, who did your experiment. We had 120 million people.
Yeah.
We found something a little different.
We have not put it back in the literature, but we just hired, we now have, as of about 9 months ago, we have a research team where we have 3 people with PhDs whose job it is going to publish a lot of the stuff we're doing. Now they're going through a backlog of things.
Yeah.
And it's not as interesting to go through a backlog of things when you weren't the one doing that research. So they're not as they're kind of trying to do new things, and I'm like,
that's a graduate student.
yeah, these people, we made the mistake of having people that already were PhDs.
Did you find the existing language pedagogy helpful, marginally helpful, or useless?
Marginally helpful.
Margin.
Yeah, so helpful, not useless, but not as useful as we wanted it to be. And I'll talk a little about that. Okay, so we did this experiment. Now, I'm going to show you something pretty interesting. We have not launched this. This is one of the things we do when we're adding a new feature. One of the first few things we do is, there's a whole feature development kind of pipeline. At some point, once we have a rough version of it in the app, we try to get people kind of to come into the lab and use it, and we try to see what, how they react to the new feature. So I'm going to show you one. This is a new feature that we have not yet launched. It's launching in a couple of weeks. This is a pretty old video. This is about 3 months old, so the feature now looks pretty different. But I'm going to show you this 3-month-old video. It's basically our idea for how to teach conversation better. So, and what it is, this is a chat bot. So we're launching basically an artificial intelligence so that you can actually talk to an artificial intelligence. And it's funny, for a while we wanted to launch a thing where you could talk to other users. Yeah. You don't know how many times this has been suggested to us. Hey, I need a way to talk to other users. And we spent a long time, we even went like halfway developing this feature, and we found something pretty interesting. People don't like talking to other people in a language that they don't know. I mean, some people do, but it's a small fraction. The majority of people feel way too self-conscious talking in a language where you're kind of not very good at, and you have somebody in a video talking to them, they feel way too self-conscious and they don't want to do it again. They do it once and they're like, ooh, that was rough, and like they don't want to do it because
people don't want to be idiots.
They feel like idiots. This is the problem. And this actually, we started looking into this a lot. We found this pretty interesting thing. The army, they do a lot of things well. One of the things is they need to teach some people a language. They have these translators. They need to teach them. In particular, they really care about teaching Arabic. So they need to teach people Arabic. Now, the army being the army, it costs them a lot of money to teach a single person Arabic. Probably cost them like $500,000 to teach somebody Arabic. But they started finding many years ago that when they taught, when they were trying to teach the language to a new person, some people did really well and learned it really well. Whereas other people, same amount of money spent trying to teach them the language, didn't really learn all that much. So they realized, well, there are some people who are just kind of better at learning languages. So they developed a whole test to try to figure out who's good at learning a language. And there's all kinds of things that matter. General intelligence kind of matters. There's a few things that matters, but one of the most significant factors is basically the fear of sounding stupid. So if you have a fear of sounding stupid, you're not good at learning a language. Just because what happens is at the very beginning, you may be as smart as the next person who kind of doesn't care about sounding stupid. At the very beginning, you're about equal because you're about as smart. But then the other person just practices so much more because they're like, yeah, I don't care about something stupid. So they just practice and practice and practice. Whereas you're just there, I'm not saying anything. I'm not practicing. And at some point, the other person is just way better than you at. And so this is one of the biggest things about learning a language is the fear of sounding stupid. So
do you test for, I'm afraid to sound stupid?
I don't know how to, I go out. Yeah, the army, yeah, you can. I think you can. But we don't know how to do that in an app. So what we decided to do is we decided to make a system that would work for everybody, where the idea is that you talk to a computer, people don't have trouble sounding stupid to a computer. At least not yet, because computers don't judge us yet.
As far as we know.
As far as we know. So what we did is we developed this thing to try to teach. So I'm going to show you the video.